to another episode of Hot Takes, where we talk about things in leadership and life that we should be talking about, but we're not. Happy to welcome Nicole Deal to the table here today.
Thank you for having me.
She is chock full of hot takes, and we are going to get to hear a few of those today. Go ahead and take us off.
All right, the first one, we need to set more boundaries with technology. And before I dive in, I will caveat that I recognize technology brings us a lot of benefits. However, it's also giving us too much to pay attention to, just too much.
Totally. Like you love to hear from your mom during the day. Sometimes you just want to stay focused on one thing.
Yeah. It's like, how do I describe it? It's like technology allows us to be more connected with the world than we ever have, right? But the issue is it's coming at a cost for us to feel connected with ourselves and be present in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a gift and it's a curse. And it's an active effort to stay a little bit disconnected.
Yes.
How would you say that you do that?
Yeah. I think of the pieces of technology that are so commonly seen. So I think of like Apple Watches, and no knock on Apple, because I love the continuity that like whatever's on your Mac can go to your phone, to your watch. But again, at what cost? So I think back to when I had an Apple Watch, and I remember having this conversation with you because I'm like, it's too much. I'm getting text messages, dings for phone calls, emails, all of the things going to my watch. And I felt pressure to like respond to it. It's like I knew the people around me knew I had this gadget. So if I'm not responding, in my mind, it's like, oh, they know I'm ignoring them. And that doesn't feel good.
Right.
So I was like, okay, maybe if I remove those notifications, I don't need every text going to my watch. And then I'm, took a moment to realize I don't even like this piece of technology doesn't really serve me anymore. Yeah. So you pushed me. You're like, well, what's keeping you from getting rid of it? I was like, I don't know, just pattern of behavior. So I got rid of it and haven't looked back since. So thank you.
Huge win.
Yeah, huge win.
And I love that you covered like there's guilt around it too. Like it's hard to do in work, in your personal life. All the areas are coming at you constantly.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of how you're doing it personally. Like where do you see that boundary setting and that mindfulness show up for you in the workplace?
Yes. And I realize I want to go into like the phone piece too, because there's a lot of boundaries that can be set there too. And I want to offer mine. But I will go into like the work setting. So with work, our team does such a good job at this where we set boundaries that one are like personal to us, or maybe it supports the entire team. So for example, at the team level, we use like Slack, like statuses. So it'll say if we're in a meeting, we might use like a heads down or like focus time, some sort of icon to emulate that. So if I'm in a meeting with you, I'm not feeling pressure if, let's say, Grift, my manager, pings me and sends me a message. I'm not feeling like I need to respond right away. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of cultures who there's an expectation of like, I'm messaging you, you need to respond because I know you're seeing it.
Right.
So I think that's something we do really well. So I would encourage leaders to consider where are there spaces to kind of limit notifications and this maybe unwritten rule that you need to be always on.
Yeah.
That's a term we're always hearing, always on.
Yeah.
So that's something I want to call out. And then I do want to talk more about like the phone nonsense. I'm going to call it nonsense because I just think about my typical trip into work and my just what I see is that people are just heads down. One, it's bad for our back and our shoulders.
Yes.
I know PT has a whole issue with that. But nonetheless, it's like everyone's on their phone. They're listening to music. They're just not in that moment. And it's so sad. It's like we're missing connection with people because they're trying to connect with other people who aren't there with them.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like setting boundaries with our phone is super important because that's the gadget that's like always on our hip.
Right.
So I'd be curious to hear yours. Do you have any boundaries that you set with yours?
Well, even you saying like we talk about like on public transportation, I'm like, how many more people would get asked out on our date or that their sweater looks cute or these little moments that like would make your day we're just completely unaware of.
Yeah.
So even those small moments of taking your headphones out, putting your phone away, whether you make conversation or not, you're still just being somewhere.
Yeah. Just lift your head up once in a while.
Yeah.
That's why I love the architecture boat tour in Chicago. Because if you're ever on it, like you just look up and you're like, oh my gosh, all this beautiful architecture.
Totally.
It's like we're missing, like as an analogy, we're missing that throughout our lives. We just got to look up once in a while.
Yeah.
So what's helped me do that I use do not disturb on my phone. So during the workday from like, let's say 9 to 3, I'm not getting notified with text messages. I'll get calls from like family if it's important. So one thing is like setting those boundaries, also communicating them is very important. So do not disturb is a huge one. This is another very hot take. So, on your phone, you get a new email, you get a new text, you get that like little number over the icon of the app. I have all of those turned off.
So some people might think that's a little extreme. A little extreme.
But try it out. Maybe it's too much, but then dial back. Figure out maybe there's a few apps that you don't need to see. You have, 2 notifications on, I can't even think of, on email. Yeah. Or when people, because I feel like this is another hot take.
Reddit. People get like Reddit notifications.
And the people who, I feel like there's 2 groups of people, and I'm usually not one to stereotype, but there are people who either have a clean inbox or you have 14,000 plus emails. And when I see someone's phone who has that 14,000 number, it's yelling at me. I'm like, this isn't even my phone, but it's giving me a visceral reaction.
100%.
So I'm already getting warm just thinking about it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is there's time to be more thoughtful. There's time to be more present. There's time to be more mindful of where you are, who you're talking to, all those great things.
Yeah.
What would you say about like bringing that mindful piece, that presence piece into this?
Yes. Great segue, Nora, into my second hot take. So second hot take is, you guys are going to hear it first. Mindfulness is going to be the number 1 skill that you're seeing in leadership development programs.
Ooh, yes, it is.
Yeah. Because mindfulness, let me define it first for those who might not know. So an easy way to describe it is it's paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. And that to me is like such a critical skill. It's a practice. So you don't just like, even the Buddha, like no one's like 100% mindful all the time.
Right.
It's a constant practice. You're building the muscle, but it's so important because it leads to so many benefits at work and just as humans.
Totally. And if someone's listening and they're thinking, okay, this sounds a little woo-woo.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
It's rooted in neuroscience. So I love to bring that in because let's go into kind of the role that mindfulness plays with our brain function and neuroplasticity. So for those who don't know, what neuroplasticity is, it's our brain's ability to adapt and change based on new learnings, new experiences, new memories. For a while, we thought that like whatever our personality is, it's stable. We have fixed traits. And I'd say probably even beyond like 10 years, but it's kind of more recently we're recognizing that we're able to mold and create new neural pathways and like new ways of thinking, behaving that can support us if we put our attention towards it. And mindfulness is one practice that can help us do that, make stronger neural pathways. Mindfulness can help us better regulate our emotions, which I have a great example of that in a moment, but also it enhances our cognition. It helps us become more focused and have stronger attention. It also, research shows we're more productive, more creative people when we have a formal practice of mindfulness.
Yeah. And I'm hearing like growth, change, maybe deeper words that leaders are more familiar with, but it's cool that mindfulness could positively impact all of these areas.
You got it.
So if a leader is wondering like how this could show up in the workplace, can you give an example of how you or someone that you work with does this well?
Yes. So it's really cool to say that everyone at Thoughtium in their own way is either formally or informally practicing mindfulness. But I want to spotlight one of our co-founders, Norm Ralph. So he, I know, has a formal practice. He does yoga. He's been doing meditation, sound baths, all the things. And while he has a mindfulness practice, he is also just a bright, brilliant individual with years of experience in the area that we're in. So, and for example, like you could imagine someone who has, years of experience, all of the knowledge, their initial inclination would be, I want to share that with other people. Right. He does an amazing job at balancing like what his perspective is and like his experience and allowing other people to come in with theirs and him receive it in a way that's very curious and very just open. So like, for example, we might be designing a workshop together and he might already be formulating like a really cool plan of how to execute it, but he'll allow me to come with my own perspective And I can like hear him right now. He'd just say, "Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that."
Totally.
You've probably heard him say that once or twice. And like in that moment, it's so cool because he's choosing, whether he knows it or not, he's choosing to lead with curiosity, to be present and open to someone else versus coming in with a judgment or a preference or a recommendation that might be already wired in his brain from his previous experience.
Yeah. It's a bit of like he shares the lesson with you while seeing the value in your ideas too.
Totally. Yeah. And it's a gift, and I will double down that it's a skill and a practice, because it's every moment there's an opportunity to be present or pull from your past or think about the future. Yeah. So it doesn't serve you all of the time, but there are so many more moments where we can all be more present and more mindful.
Totally. And you had mentioned formal and informal. What else did you want to cover there?
Yeah. So I think when people hear of like formal mindfulness practices, and like when people hear mindfulness, they think of formal practices. So for example, like meditation, yoga, for example. There's also like informal practices, and you kind of allow that to show up in your day-to-day. So for example, I would recommend everyone to try this, and it's not that hard, but it might be challenging. For those who love to go on walks, an informal practice would be to turn your phone off, maybe not even bring it with you. No music. I know it's that gadget stuck to our hip, but maybe just, 30 minutes. Yeah. The world's not going to go on fire. Let's hope. So just set the phone aside, go on a walk, and an informal practice would be noticing, for example, all of the sounds in nature around you on that walk and just bringing your awareness using your senses. So like in the moment, using your senses is an informal practice of mindfulness that I would love to put forward for people.
I love that. And you can do that when you have a child going for a walk with a dog. It's super easy to do. Neuroplasticity. Yeah. Start doing it and you'll get better at it.
Yeah, it becomes a pattern. And like brushing your teeth with your opposite hand, that's a fun informal practice to try.
Might be messy, but it
might be messy. Yeah. Behind closed doors.
Awesome. Well, if people are interested in wondering like, okay, whether you're a leader, whether you're an employee, you're interested in getting started, whether it's, like I said, in the workplace or in your personal life, where can people begin?
I would say what's near and dear to me is I went through an 8-week training. It was for mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it's one type of mindfulness training. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It helps you better manage your stress. It doesn't get rid of stress because we're human. We all have it. But how can you better figure out what's in your control, what's not? So I'd say like a formal 8-week practice, that's like this research shows that's really where you can get that neuroplasticity and your wiring going. Yeah. But if not that, Thoughtium can bring it forward to your company. So if maybe you're just introducing the topic, we can go from introduction to mindfulness to more of like intermediate stuff. We could definitely work with you there. Yeah. But I've done a few sessions where I'll like introduce different like maybe breathing techniques and some of those informal practices. And it's super cool because it allows people, like, sure, we hear it's a very important thing to try, but you don't know how important it is or what it feels like until you actually do it.
Right.
So we create space for them to actually try on different practices and see what works for them. So then they can use it outside of the workplace.
Yeah. Every person, every team is different.
You got it.
And what would you say, like in general, if there's one thing that people could take away today, what would that be?
One thing?
Yeah.
I'd say just like the headline of replacing technology in your head being focused on like a world outside of yours and just lifting your head up and just being more aware of your surroundings.
Being right where you are.
And one specific example, an easy way to start, people, stop taking your phone into the bathroom. You don't need it there. That is a great way to be present. Yeah. And I'm just going to offer that up because years ago, it sounded weird to do that. And too many of us are doing it. And it's becoming more normal. So consider that my third hot take. No more phones in the bathroom.
Well, your passion for mindfulness is clear. You are such a good example of it, both at work and in your personal life. And I hope people learned a little bit more about how they can incorporate it in very small but meaningful ways today.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to add before we close out?
I don't think so. I'm complete.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Hot Takes. We will be back next week with our regular episode of Navigating Now. Thank you.
Thank you.